Those of you, we call it our social sanctuary, or those of you that will be viewing this virtually, we greet you, and we hope that we will have a fruitful and an enriching discussion as it relates to public safety, in particular to our students. All right, Michael Graves is the chairperson of the group ACT, and he and I will be sharing and co-chairing the evening together, and of course he'll be doing more than I'll be doing. And so we're looking forward to having a great, fruitful time. We see in our audience, before I introduce those that are here, we see, of course, other officers from other municipalities, as well as, of course, our sheriff department, our district attorney is here, and we see other county commissioners that are here, and persons who are running for school board. Let me start with all of those of you in the audience that are in law enforcement. Will you please stand? Let's give them a hand. The great job that they are doing to help keep us safe. Thank you so much. City officials. So we see the mayor of Burlington, city officials, and county officials. And we see county commissioners. Will you all please stand? Let's give them a hand. We see our judge is here. Judge Brown is here. And, of course, let's give him a hand. Anyone else working with county government? All right, I see my wife is here. She works for county government. Give her a hand. All right.
We have the police chief from Mebane.
Yes, the police chief from Mebane is here. Will you please stand again? As well as Gibsonville. Chief Parrish, will you please stand again? I want to give everybody their due. All right. Anyone running for public office? Senator Rogers. All right. All right. God bless you. God bless you. God bless each and every one of you. We thank you so much for coming, and we hope that we have a very fruitful evening. Now, let's introduce, Mike, will you introduce those that are up on our dais?
We have well, I'll let you introduce yourselves, starting with Representative.
Hey, good evening, everybody. It is nice to be with our community today. Rushed home from Raleigh. I'm Representative Ricky Hurtado, represent District 63, which is Graham, half of Burlington, Mebane, Pleasant Grove, and Green Level. It's nice to be with you today.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patsy Simpson. I am the vice chair of the Board of Education, and I happen to be a proud member of Ebenezer Church.
Good evening. I'm Sandy Ellington Graves, and I'm the chair of the Board of Education, and I work alongside Patsy.
I'm Terry Johnson, Sheriff of Alamance County, and I'm born and raised here in Alamance County.
I'm Brian Long. I'm the chief of police in Burlington, also born and raised right here in Alamance County.
And John Paisley, I'm the chairman of the county commissioners.
Let's give each of them a hand. What I'm going to do in starting our evening off is I'm just going to ask some factual questions, and then Michael will take over from me and he will ask some more detailed questions, okay? The subject is public safety as it relates to our schools. So what I want to start off with, and Chief Long and Sheriff could answer, I guess, how many SRO officers do we have in Alamance County?
I won't speak to the total. I'll leave that to the sheriff because he probably has the other bulk of them along with some of our other municipal agencies. But I currently have 5 full-time employed SROs working in both high schools that are in the city, both middle schools that are in the city, and then we cover C-Tech as well in the city, and that person has a dual role as a DARE officer. So I have 5 full-time, and then I supplement elementary schools with a ERSO program. And that varies from time to time on how many I've got available. But I have 3 that are very consistent, almost doing full-time in our schools. So that would bring us up to about 8 full-time in schools, and then supplemented with part-time work.
Okay. Sheriff?
Yes, we have a school resource officer in every single school in the county That is the elementary, that is the middle school, that is the high school, and some of them are sitting out here tonight. We also have a DARE officer that teaches DARE in our elementary schools here in Alamance County.
Okay. And even though they're not up here, if any of the other chiefs wants to sort of come up and grab a mic to answer that question so we'll know, you can feel free.
We do not, I'm Ron Parrish, the chief of the Gibsonville Police Department. Our city or town pretty much is split between the county, Guilford and Alamance County. So we don't have a school, we don't have any schools on the Alamance County side. We do have one elementary school that's on the Guilford side. At one time, we had a DARE officer that taught. As a matter of fact, I think it was the last school in Guilford County that still had a DARE program. Unfortunately, I wasn't able, as our calls for service continued to increase, I wasn't able to get an additional person in order to answer calls for service. So we had to do away with that DARE position, unfortunately. Now, we do share a very good relationship with the principal and everybody at that school. Our officers are in there almost every single day. The principal, the assistant principal, has not only my phone number, but our assistant's phone number, our lieutenant's phone number, so they can get us at the drop of a hat. There's no issues at all. Now, one of the things that came out of our last board meeting was the fact that we do need to enhance security for our schools. And what the board has offered to do is to increase our line item for extra duty. And so we're going to double that, which will give me the opportunity to allow our off-duty officers to work every single day in the school. So that's what we're trying to do.
So I'm Chief Toby Harrison, Harvard Police Department. First of all, I want to say thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this event tonight. I think we'll have a great conversation. Being the smallest municipality, one of the smallest municipalities in the county, we have the smallest police department. We're only staffed with 9 full-time people and 2 part-time officers. So, of course, we don't have a full-time SRO for Haw River Elementary, but what we do staff it with is through part-time monies, through ABSS's grant, through the SRO grant project, that we get roughly about $14,000 to staff it as much as we can. We generally have one officer that works it more than any other officer, and he's also our DARE officer for that school, and I'd like to recognize him real quick. Sergeant Ellis, if you please stand. You know, we have a unique situation. You know, we have a school there that a lot of our students are in Graham, they're in Green Level, and we work really hard with our students there at that elementary school because I'm very passionate, not just like Sergeant Ellis is. You know, we got to invest in our children, and that's our future, and we are here to talk about that because we recognize that. So I've been communicating with some of our ABSS school board members and stuff to be very passionate, and hopefully the county commissioners can find a way to fund all the SROs in the county, because I think it's important. It's one aspect of importance. It's a multifaceted approach, and that's something we need to remember. It's not just about SROs. That's a great starting point, but we've got to make sure that, like we talked about, the windows, the doors, you know, the key swipe systems, all those things are all important parts of the puzzle. So I think that's where it starts. And thank y'all for having me tonight.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. Chief Caldwell, Mebane again. So, Mebane, we have one middle school in which we have a full-time school resource officer, and we have 3 elementary schools which are employed, just like with Chief Long, with part-time off-duty officers. So, that's how we staff our elementary schools. Thank you, Reverend Cummings.
How you doing? I'm Captain Tony Velez, Grand PD. Chief Cole is at our city council meeting, so she couldn't make this meeting tonight. But we have 3 full-time SROs in the city of Graham. One of them, Corporal Newdecker, is at at Ray Street Academy. We have another one at Graham High and then one at Graham Middle. We have 2 elementary schools in the city, and we, like everyone else, staffs those with part-time officers that are funded by the part-time grant from ABSS.
Give a hand to all of these chiefs and their officers, who I'm sure do a great job. My next question is, I guess, for Ricky and or anyone who can answer it. what are the the gun laws as it relates to the state of North Carolina? In other words, can an 18-year-old get a AR-15? What is the law as it relates to North Carolina in terms of carrying concealed weapons, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Pastor Cummington. I'll begin with where the conversation is right now nationally, because I think that's a lot where we've been paying a lot of attention to, right? Where there has been legislators on both sides of the aisle in Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, thinking about what does a bipartisan framework look like to address this issue comprehensively. I appreciate what the chief said around it's a multifaceted issue. You need a multifaceted response to a complicated issue. And so we know nationally that if you're 18 or over, you can purchase an AR-15, right, assault rifle. And it doesn't look like we will be moving in a direction that raises the age from 18 to 21, although there are creating incentives in this bipartisan framework that will allow them to think about how you have more intensive, more comprehensive background checks for folks that fall within that 18 to 21 age. And so I think that's part of the conversation right now at the national level. Now when you think about what's happening at the state level in Raleigh, this is a debate that has been going on for years, right? Not just in North Carolina, but across the country around what gun safety measures look like in North Carolina. And so I know that there's been debate, but without much movement forward around what does the conversation around safe storage look like in North Carolina? What does the conversation around making sure that things like red flag laws are part of the conversation? And I know at least now in the bipartisan framework that's happening in the national level, they're looking for ways to incentivize what states do right now. And so that's a conversation that's happening in Raleigh right now. We're in the short session, so that means that we won't be in session very much longer. We'll probably be out by the end of June and July, which means that there's actually limited opportunities to work on policy in Raleigh right now. And so a lot of the conversations, if we do want to visit the gun safety conversation, would have to come in a special session or in 2023 after the elections in November.
All right. Thank you. Brother Mike?
I want to go back to the SRO question and go with any of the chiefs, of course the sheriff, and the board members. Are there any, how much communication do law enforcement do with ABSS as far as training or exercises to say if there is, unfortunately, if there is a shooting or a shooter on campus, how much communication is being done to, prevent that and communicate with each other?
Every year, our SROs do an active shooter drill in all the schools in the county. We're finishing up, start back next year. But that active shooter drill gets the teachers, the principal, and all involved on what to expect if an active shooter comes on campus, what to expect from us, and where to go and hide and how to protect the kids. And I think that is very important today with what's going on in our society.
Chief Long?
Yeah, in a similar way, we had a meeting earlier in the day, and we were discussing that we not only do training, which we do training of our staff to make sure that they're appropriately certified and trained and that they're achieving the goals that ABSS and that citizens expect. But in addition to that, we also do site assessments. So we make sure that our officers are familiar with the schools and we know what the liabilities of any school might be. But we have a very good working relationship with the school system itself and do a lot of collaborative work, not just relative to a campus, but the bigger picture of school safety.
Any other chiefs want to tackle that?
I'll just add to that point that not only is training done annually, but we shouldn't dismiss the collaborative efforts with Alamance Community College in the mass or critical incidents that may or may not occur. I think it's important to note that while we are very attached to the term active shooter, right, and active shooter response. Mass casualty incidents are probably most important because the response is pretty generic, and what that allows us to do is to train in the same way. Whether it's what Burlington is doing, what the Sheriff's Department is doing, what Graham or Haw River or Gibsonville is doing, the training platform is the same. It's uniform and should be consistent throughout. Additionally, I know with the Sheriff's Department, they usually partner with the surrounding agencies who are more likely to respond in an assist capacity so that everybody's always on the same sheet of music. Just thought that's important to note.
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge our soon-to-be superintendent who just came in, Dr. Dane Butler.
Please, Mr. Butler, please join us. We have a chair up here waiting for you. There's room at the cross. Come on.
Yes.
We were waiting for you. We knew you would be late.
The next thing is, I said to Pastor Covington when we came in, we've been in meetings all day today, no lunch or anything, and it was all in regards to what can we do to improve school safety. And as most of you knew, the dialogue, it didn't just start with the tragic incident in Texas. I know Commissioner Pam Thompson, years ago when she was a member of the school board, we worked very hard, and she was very instrumental in getting the first training for those types of situations. I recall being at one at Eastern Alamance, and it was just quite shocking, I guess, that we were at that point in this country where we have to have that. But I'm glad that we have started that. In addition to that, my grandson, who's happened to be a kindergarten, came home this year, and he was actually demonstrating to me the position that the school was requiring him to get in doing that particular type of training. So I do know that it is happening throughout our schools. One thing from an earlier meeting today is that we learned that all of our departments have recently done, and this has been ongoing, is they do safety assessments at each of the schools. And that information is going to be shared very soon with the board. I'll let Ms. Ellerton Grave talk about something else that we're doing. But safety is always the number one priority. The 15 years I've been on board, definitely safety is number one. And today we had a meeting, and the meeting was with the county commissioners to talk about, are we just going to talk the talk because of what recently happened in Texas, or are we really going to commit ourselves to getting adequate funding for not only SROs, but also for other safety equipment and things that construction needs and things that we need within our school system. So I assure you that this dialogue and conversation has been going on for quite some time.
Do you want me to respond to that?
We are going to sort of control things up here, and then if we have time, we will take audience questions right now. Brother Eddie, go ahead, Ms.
I'll just echo all of these. I think the collaboration between the law enforcement partners and ABSS has been as a parent with a child in ABSS and nieces and nephews in the school system, it has been reassuring to watch. I showed up at Southern High School one day to drop off a lunchbox that was forgotten, and there was nobody in sight. And they were in the middle of a lockdown drill, and it was the quietest campus. But everybody was doing exactly what they were trained to do, and it was impressive to watch that. I think that the tragedy in Texas has sharpened the focus on school safety. There's lots of layers that we identified today and in conversations over the past couple of weeks with the commissioners and with the law enforcement partners is, we've got a lot of work to do. And I think one of the things that we're most excited about with ABSS is this school safety task force that's going to allow the collaboration to continue and bring a lot of these people to the table to start peeling those layers back and figuring out what we can do SROs is obviously a top priority of mine, but also the doors and the windows and some of the things that we talked about, just the smaller things that we can also address. So I look forward to that task force. Everybody has been, I know Representative Hurtado, Representative Rydell, and Senator Galey were all three invited as well, all the police chiefs, and all of the commissioners. So we're really excited about seeing that come to inception and what that can do for the county.
Just before I turn it back over, and I saw Ms. Paisley won't speak, but just before I turn it back over to Mike, after Ms. Paisley speak, you mentioned the task force. Will there be any persons from the community on that task force?
We would like that, yes. We've just started, so it's very early conversations. We were kind of gauging that interest level, and everybody the response has been overwhelming. So I'm looking forward to seeing that come to fruition, and we would like to have some community input.
Be great to have people from the community because they're stakeholders, also. All right, good.
Additionally, we just completed a meeting that started at 4 o'clock. That was with the school system and their board and the county commissioners and their board. And I think all of us were present on both boards. Very, very productive meeting. The task force is to be completed very, very soon. And the county commissioners have our next county commissioners meeting on June the 20th, which is a week from yesterday. So we look forward to looking at our budget carefully.
With the safety assessments that you guys do with the school system, what can law enforcement and ABS, Superintendent, tell us what are some things that you feel are lacking as far as safety issues with the schools that you would like, whether it's personnel or simple locks on doors, keypads, and things like that? What are some things that you would like to let the county commissioners and the city council know that are needs to keep our kids safe? Patsy.
I just wanted to say one thing that as a result of, that I think is very important, a result of the meeting that we had earlier. When we were getting information on the funding sources for the SROs, one of the things that I learned today is that the state of North Carolina, this is for you, Ricky, the state of North Carolina only funds partially the SROs for high school. So one of the things that, and then we, the County Commission School Board, funds the additional salaries as well as the municipalities. So one of the things that I asked for today is that we talk with our legislators as well as do a resolution, a joint resolution, to ask the state of North Carolina, with the emphasis on needing additional SROs, is to change that law to include the state funding for SROs for middle school as well as elementary school. So that was an example of an outcome from the meeting today that I think will assist us, if that is the objective of the school board and county commission, is to have SROs in all schools.
Our agency does an assessment of every school in the county. We have done that this year, and what we found sort of alarming was the number of doors that were left open or left unlocked, and that has been addressed with ABSS, and they intend to check and make sure that is changed. We also talked about some of the schools, the age of the schools. Some of the locks may not even work on the doors. Hopefully that monies will be made available for the school system to replace these doors. Also, our agency on our computers and our cars has a diagram of every school in the county. So if there is an active shooter and the call comes in a building, our people will be able to bring it up on the screen and immediately respond to the source. Unlike, and I don't like talking about other law enforcement agencies, but unlike in Texas, our people are not going to wait no 45 minutes to go take care of the active shooter. And we train constantly with the schools, and I'm very proud of our work working relationship with ABSS and the teachers and the principal.
I left here in 2016, and since then, just got back, obviously. We've come a long way since then due to the work of you guys. So kudos to you guys for what's been done already. It should not take a shooting in Texas to bring us here to discuss this. We all know that. We don't want another one for sure, and certainly not here. I will say this. I think and I'm hopeful that by the county commissioners meeting that we're going to be able to find a way to bring forth a solution to have an SRO in every school. I really do think that's going to be the end goal, the end result. Is what we're talking about today at 4 o'clock. We've talked about it for the past couple of weeks. Now, I haven't officially started yet, but I feel like I've been here long enough to say that I'm confident that we're going to make this work. With that being said, I've heard a lot of people talk today about the facilities, and it's true. We have to do a better job of securing our facilities. If the door does lock, we need to lock it. If it doesn't lock, we need to fix it. So that has to be a priority as well, and that's something that even if you have an SRO, if the door is open, we still can have a major problem. So that has to be addressed as well. That takes funding, and I put myself at the top of the list of being responsible for that moving forward to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible to be able to do that for our facilities. As we learned today, that funding that we get, a lot of times it's restricted. We can't use it for just anything. So when we get capital outlay money, we have to use that on brick and mortar on the buildings. So if the money is there to fix our buildings, which I hopeful that we're going to use it in that capacity moving forward. I think we've already done a good job with Dr. Thorpe, who I think is here somewhere in the audience, who's leading the building of the new high school. We've come a long way. I want to make sure that this audience knows that progress has been made, and I can say that having been gone for about 6 years. We have a long way to go. I think all districts do. Here's the good news. I've never seen, and I'm a native of Alamance County, I've never seen the relationship as strong as it is right now between the school board, the law enforcement agencies, and the county commissioners. So that's very promising for me coming in as the new superintendent. So I'm hopeful that we're going to see a lot of gains in a very quick amount of time.
The sheriff mentioned about having diagrams of the schools in the county. Do the other municipalities have diagrams of the schools
Yes.
in their municipalities? Okay.
They all do. And, you know, there's certain things. Each school has an individual safety plan for the schools. Principals do that every year. And they constantly monitor that safety plan. One of the things that I know we as a board made sure with the most recent passage of the bond money is that we were concerned that we have so many of our high schools is considered to be the open concept, or the Florida concept was very popular back in the early 60s when they built the high schools. So you will see as you ride around our high schools now that part of the bond funds is to put fencing, attractive looking fencing, not wire fences, around all of our schools to help with that situation. Those schools were built, you know, where they have wings and you have a door on both ends. And students come and go as they move from A building to B building to D building or whatever. So we did take that in consideration when we looked at the bond money of an attempt to do that. And of course, one of the other things I wanted to say in terms of working relationship, in that tragic in Texas, one of the things was they didn't know the chain of command, who was really responsible to make the final decision. I can assure every parent out here, as the sheriff and others said, we know how to take care of business, and we can assure you we won't be waiting even 15 minutes to make sure that your children are protected. That's why we do have plans. So be assured there are plans at each individual schools, and they're constantly monitored and updated. Thank you.
I want to ask the question, does it make sense? Because when again, we're here because of the tragedy in Texas, which is a shame because this should have been talked about a long time ago. But I noticed that the guy went through, the shooter went through an unlocked door. Does it make sense to have automatic doors that lock, have the SRO in each school that's maybe responsible through video cameras or whatever to lock the doors or open the doors as need be? I know there's a lot going on through the day, but from what I see in the Parkland shooting as well, they came through unlocked doors. And so my thing is, does it make sense to have automatic doors locked and somebody manning those doors?
It certainly makes sense. It comes down to funding and planning and a timeline to make it happen. So that's on our radar right now, I guess. Yeah. Right, Ms. Simpson?
Yeah, I was going to say Dr. Thorpe could probably address it better, but also with the bond money from you, we are putting vestibules in all of our schools so that there is a second layer before you enter into the school. So he can describe that.
Kind of like an airlock, right?
Yes, he can describe that as our most, and tell you how many schools and how many more we need as a safety factor. Thank you.
Good evening. I was sitting in the back. I didn't know I'd be recognized, but that's fine. There's a few things that we are doing, and I'm hearing folks address. We are creating, excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Todd Thorpe, Assistant Superintendent of Operations for Alamance Burlington School System. So, and safety does fit under my umbrella I've been doing it, for about a year? Yeah, safety fit under my umbrella for about a year. I had to think about how long that's been. So we are doing a couple things. I've heard the sheriff. He was talking about their computer program, and our SROs are going to see a program that we have. It's called Inside, that does the same thing, but it has 3D imaging of all our schools interior-wise. So that's a progressive step that we've made that we're going to make available to our law enforcement. I think that will help unify our response. We're also creating safety vestibules in the front of each of our schools. If you've been into any that we've created, when you walk in, that's as far as you're going. We buzz you in the door. We have a service window. If you need to leave your child, grandchild, niece, nephew, some lunch money or a book bag or whatever, we can accept that there. If you're there to volunteer, we have a volunteer system. We have a computerized system that when you log in, it's going to do a quick background check. You log in through your driver's license. It's looking for sex offenders or felons. Hopefully nobody shows up there, but if they do, we're alerted in the office, and there's a process that we deal with that. Also, in that same vestibule, if you sign in as a volunteer, say you're one of our normal volunteers, now we can buzz you into the rest of the school, and you go about and volunteer and do what you need to do. The cameras and buzz-in systems, we have, actually I got bids I think coming in the 16th for 5 schools. We got 5 other schools ready to go out. That will give us key access to our doors, not key access, but the keyless access. So it'll be on card readers. We can give law enforcement access. We can take it away. We can give it. We can do whatever we need to do. There'll be certain folks that'll have 24-hour access. Other folks will have school day access. So we have a lot of programs moving on right now. We do drills. We have drills in our schools for active shooters, tornado, earthquake, fire drills. We encourage schools to do lockdown drills as often as they feel like it's needed. They usually, or don't usually, they orchestrate that with local law enforcement and make sure everyone's observing, because we want to make sure we don't make a mistake. That's one time we don't have that opportunity. Am I missing anything that we do? I think I've covered sort of the basis of what we're trying to do to prevent to prevent any injury to our children. We do have some sites for relocation. If we would by chance have some sort of incident that we had to leave campus, we do have sites established for that as well.
To go to funding, because all this costs money. So to go to funding, to any other chiefs, law enforcement, of course, ABSS, Superintendent Ricky, and of course, Mr. Paisley. Where's the money going to come from? Does the law enforcement agencies have line items in your budget for school safety? And can that be shared? I do know on different committees that I sit on and boards, there's grant monies out there. Will law enforcement agencies be seeking that type of funding as well, which is free money, and that's always good? But as far as the taxpayers, Mr. Paisley, once these bids come in, what will the county do to make sure that the school system is funded to protect the kids?
In our proposed budget, our interim county manager has proposed 4 additional school SROs already. The discussion today went further than that, much further, and we discussed up to 14. That is 10 additional SROs. And our next budget hearing, in fact, our hearing was our last meeting on June the 6th, and we will need to pass a budget on June the 20th, which is a week from yesterday. We're required by state law to pass our budget on or before June 30th. Our only meeting between now and then is next Monday on June the 20th. So we will take a vote on our budget, and that hopefully will include additional resources. We know there are many, many funds in addition to what the county provides. A large, probably the largest amount, I'm guessing, Mr. Hardotto, it comes from the state of North Carolina and or federal funds. And a large part of the teacher funds and things of that sort come from the state and federal. But capital resources primarily come from the county. And we're trying to do everything we can to keep our schools well maintained and safe.
Can I respond to that? Thank you for bringing that up. And Mrs. Simpson here alluded to this earlier in terms of the funding conversation. And just to provide context and to be clear, the state of North Carolina, the deal that is made between the state and local governments is that local governments fund the capital, right, the buildings, and state's supposed to fund the personnel. And historically, that has meant teachers, counselors, you name it, right? But I think in this conversation, we're talking about SROs and school safety. And so I agree with you in terms of having to revisit this conversation around making sure that the state is paying their fair share to make sure that the burden on local taxpayers and local governments doesn't fully fall. It doesn't continue to increase, to your point, right? Because you all are having to do the budget now, but the county is one piece of the pie, right? And we have to make sure that the state is also chipping in when it comes to making sure we're addressing this issue with the right urgency. The second part of this, both of you have alluded to grants. And in this last budget, the 2021-2022 budget cycle, Seneca Rogers actually reached out to us and asked us, what are we doing about school safety in Alamance County and across the state, which led us to sift through our 700-page budget to sort of see what was in there. And part of the non-recurring funding for at least this cycle is $10 million in grants for school safety training, for equipment, and things of that nature. I think that needs to become recurring funding, not non-recurring, because that allows us to plan for the future, have some stability there in terms of what this can mean for our communities, and make sure that we're utilizing those resources. And so I can commit to, if you all aren't aware of those, to getting more information to make sure I can pass it along to see what other resources are available so the burden doesn't fall all on the local government to accomplish these common goals.
It's one other thing, Ricky, with that. When we were discussing the grant funding from the state for the SROs, we got a little situation here where we have to ask the county for the budget and have it ready for them to approve for their meeting. We don't get the actual funding for the SROs until about October. So we have to basically account for those officers in that funding in our budget request. It would be nice if the state could look and possibly change and I'm not sure which specific grant that is, but it's the one that funds the high school grants, and see if somehow we could time that a little bit better so that we can, in fact, have that money available for the beginning of the school year there. And then I'm going to make one more statement, and no, Mr. Paisley or anybody, I'm not going to do all the conversation talking that I did earlier. And I'm going to make this statement. Y'all know how I am. If school securities and SROs is what you really want to make you feel your children are safe, the bottom line is we go to the county commissioners for funding. We had the conversation today about what we can cut or how we as a school system could allocate the money. But the bottom line is until you taxpayer and citizens get with the funding source for the SROs to make that a high priority, I don't believe it's going to happen. In other words, if you prefer to make sure your children are safe, then you need to speak up and say, keep your 1 cent or 2 cents savings in sales tax that might be $10 just to say you approve, and I'm not throwing any dirt, to save it, keep it, and put it on SROs, because it's political whether they want it to be or not. And so, yeah, we had a heated conversation earlier, and I promised them I was not going to go there today. But I am in front of you, the public, those who are watching. They didn't want to budge. We didn't want to budge. The way I feel about it as a parent and taxpayer and citizen, it's about what we want. We elect them. We hold them accountable. You do the same for school board. So it is time now to say, let's not just be talking about this because of this unfortunate situation in Texas. This is what we want for our children, and this is what needs to be done. So he told you when they got to approve the budget, be there, show up, text. Same thing with school board. You know, we can go deeper in our pockets. But it's going to be you guys that make it happen. So if that's what you want, make it happen.
Thank you, Patsy. Can the chiefs and the sheriff talk to the question about, is there a line item budget in your budget for school safety? If so, does that need to be increased?
Well, right now, there is line item under the personnel in our budget. And right now, we have our school resource officers in every county school that is being paid for. If there's an increase for personnel officers down the road, certainly that line item would have to be increased.
Similarly, in Burlington, there's an agreement between ABSS, the city of Burlington, for the schools that are in the city of Burlington, and they do help fund those positions. But it is a co-funding model. We still have additional cost or shared cost that we add money to what they provide us, and then that completes the SRO position. Certainly, if we got additional positions, we would have to work through our county or city council and city manager to work through the funding stream of that, but that's how it's currently done, as a shared expense.
Any other chief want to address that? Okay. All right. All right.
Well, what I believe in, as long as I've been in the community and tried to have community events, is to have community events and discussions on things that we can change and things that we can find solutions to. These people up here cannot do anything about the AR-15, those laws, but what we can do is do everything we can to protect our kids. You have the chairman of the Board of Commissioners. You have virtually every law enforcement department represented. You have the sheriff sitting here. You have the chair of the school board and the vice chair sitting here. You have a representative from the state sitting here, and you have the superintendent sitting here. These are the people that can do something about the issues that we are faced daily. We cannot do anything about the AR-15. I have my personal views on that, but that's not what this conversation is about. I want to echo with what Patsy stated about the community getting involved and making sure that your elected officials from the sheriff, and I know the chiefs are not elected, but they are hired by the city council, and the city managers are hired by the city council, so they are still your public servants. So you can hold them accountable with issues that that are concerning to us. I think in 2012, whenever the Michael Brown shooting happened, the conversation was about body cams for officers. It was very few body cams in this community. The chief, at that time, Chief Smythe, and I talked about that. We had a forum. We had the city council members, the city managers, the sheriff, of course, was there, and the county commissioners, and they agreed that it was important for our officers to have body cams. So the public got involved in it, and we got a solution. We got body cams. So that's what this is about. And so we want to go back to the SRO officers, which I very do believe it is very important to have an SRO officer at every school. The superintendent did state that with the 14 officers that the county is looking at, that will mean that we will have an SRO officer at every school.
That is correct.
But it hasn't been funded yet.
No,
Right.
but that's the plan if so.
Yeah,
We need 14.
Yeah, so currently we need 14 SRO full-time positions in order to say that we have a full-time SRO at every school. As part of our budget request for the county commissioners this year, we included 4 positions. That budget recommendation that came back from the Board of Commissioners included $945,000 as part of our expansion budget, and that includes 4 SRO positions. So that leaves us 10 additional positions currently unfunded. They are part-time through our SRO grant. So our ask to the county commissioners was to help us find a way to identify $522,000 because of that $945,000 that we've been given, or that will be given as part of that recommendation. $700,000 of that is for teacher supplements. We have 107 vacancies right now, and we have less than 60 days before school starts, give or take.
How many vacancies?
107. Teacher supplements, we're number 10 in the state, but we have districts to the east and the west that have higher teacher supplements than we do. So you're asking us as a school board, or we as a school board are tasked with making that decision. Are we going to cut teacher supplements? Are we going to cut 4 SRO positions? So we as a board decided today that that's 2 most important top priorities for us. So we do want to fund that $700,000 for those teacher supplements, our principals and our APs. That's a top priority. School safety is another top priority. So how do you choose what is more important? And we can't. We also had $1.16 million in expansion budget that we were not granted by the commissioners. And so we as a school district now have to realign those priorities to find out what can we do to tighten our ship to fund those priorities, and top being $250,000 for athletic trainers that we've been talking about for probably 5+ years. So we want to work on realigning our priorities to do the $945 in the expansion that the commissioners have generously given to us, and use that as they intended, which is with that teacher supplement and the SROs. What we're asking for is if we can cover the 1.16 and the portions of that that we feel like we can still do from a curriculum standpoint, we need the assistance for the $522,000 to give us a full-time SRO.
How does, okay, you said there are 10
part-times.
What schools are not covered by SRO officers full-time, and how do you make the decision to send a SRO officer at this school other than that school?
So our secondary schools, our middle and high schools are, in the county, all of our county schools are covered. In our municipalities, our secondary schools, middle and high schools, are the ones that are full-time covered. Our elementary schools share a part-time coverage through our municipalities, through relationships with our MOUs with our law enforcement partners. So we as a school district fund $70,000 per SRO full-time position. And then those municipalities graciously contribute those hard costs, and we appreciate that. So it is truly a joint effort in making those positions. But, and Dr. Butler, if you want to kind of address, or one of the law enforcement, how we kind of make those school assignments.
Mr. Paisley he wanted to make a statement.
I just wanted to indicate that nobody's proposing cutting teacher supplements. It was an increase that we were, in our budget, we're increasing teacher supplements. So nobody's talked about a decrease at any time. It would be a decrease in our addition to the school supplement. But again, as Sheriff Johnson and as Ms. Graves and so forth have all indicated, all of the county schools are covered. It's the cities that share part-time SROs. Thank you.
And we have to realize that our municipalities is within the county. There's a distinction there, and they pay taxes into the county as well. You know, one of the other things that fall under security is we had to give up $560,000 for the, what do you call them, athletic trainers. But that's the security. We've had some situations that could also be life and death out there on the football team, the volleyball teams, and things of that nature. We're the only school system of our size that don't have certified athletic trainers. There's so many things that we need, and the county has made great strides over the years. We have a wonderful relationship on the capital improvement team. We're forecasting now. We're talking about needs. We had the conversation today about maybe re-looking at the increase in sales tax now to specifically increase that priority in order to make sure our doors lock and things of that nature. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm picking on the county commissioners, but what I'm saying is they have the funds, they get the funds, they manage the funds, and they divvy it out. So I'm asking you, the public who's out here watching now, that if that is a high priority for you to have SROs, then we need to put the money where our mouths are and fund the additional 10 positions. And having said that, the city of Burlington told us it takes, what did they say, 6 months? It won't happen in October. We wanted to know, what can we do to have an SRO in every school by the end of August? And based on the training, the cars, the uniform, the hiring, you know, some people don't believe there should be SROs in schools, so we have to do diversity training, sensitivity training. What is the appropriate role of SROs versus administration? It's not an easy thing to do.
But isn't that the decision between ABSS, where there is an SRO officer in the school, and if the superintendent and the board decide that there's going to be an SRO officer, isn't that what's going to happen? As far not as far as funding is concerned, but if the school system decide that they want an SRO officer and go to the municipalities or the county and ask for funding for that, what would stop a SRO officer being in school?
I will let County Commissioner explain that because clearly that's what the conversations has been all day today, is how to actually fund it. We all came up with a consensus that that is what we left, but after 2.5 hours of meeting today, we accomplished a few things, but we didn't walk out with a check.
Well, before the county commissioner answer, I know Chief Long is getting ready to say something. He did make a statement back when he was talking about where we may have to go back to our city council. Well, we have the mayor here of Burlington. So if he could, address, is there something that the city council could be looking at as far as funding an SRO officer for the city schools, which it seems like it is the city schools that do not have full-time SRO officers. Is that correct?
Are there any other mayors?
It's not just City of Burlington. It's City of Burlington, Graham, City of Mebane, and Town of Haw River.
We don't have full-time at Sylvan and Pleasant Grove.
We do. Those are covered with the county.
They're full-time now?
Yes,
okay.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jim Butler. I'm the mayor of the City of Burlington, if you don't know me. And to answer the question, we've completed our budget cycle, but certainly each government has role clarity, and the school system falls under the county government, but that certainly doesn't mean that the municipal governments should not participate or we shouldn't support any endeavor that makes sense for those schools that are in the City of Burlington. The City of Burlington is what we're most concerned with our Burlington City Council, and I feel certain that our council would support virtually any initiative for the very simple fact that we take Chief Long's recommendations extremely serious, and we support our law enforcement officers at a very high level. So we look to Chief Long to come up with whatever the plan is that our city needs to do, and then we'll certainly address it from a budgetary standpoint. But most importantly, the one thing that we haven't talked about a whole lot is to put those SRO officers in schools, we've got to have bodies that we can deploy. We've got to have those that are trained, those that are hired, and those that we can deploy. And I don't know of a law enforcement agency that's fully staffed right now. So that is an issue in and of itself. And how do we want to address that? Because the ultimate issue, we've got municipalities in North Carolina. One of our large municipalities has close to 200 law enforcement officers short of being fully staffed. So that's a problem in and of itself. You heard about the school system and teachers, educators. That's a problem in and of itself. So having the money is good, and it solves a lot of problems, and it checks off a box, but you have to have a qualified person that's trained and capable of doing it, and the community's got to support that. If the community doesn't support our teachers, and if the community doesn't support our law enforcement, then this problem's going to get worse. It will not get better. So we can talk about all the money we want to, but we've got to have men and women willing to do the job because the community supports them and they're proud of that work and they understand the magnitude and the nobility of it. And that's an issue in and of itself.
Chief Long, if you share.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I think if I heard your question correctly earlier, the question was who decides on where to put the police officers in which school? I think the county and ABSS has done a really good job. I use Pleasant Grove as the example because that's the area of the county I'm from. That's a long drive out there. In the city, even though we'd love to have that SRO in every school, we do have some higher density and shorter response time. So I think there was a very intentional plan. I think the sheriff worked on that with ABSS as well, to be very strategic about, as we have been on this path of getting more SROs, which schools were at the most risk and which ones needed them first. With more officers in the city and with the ones that the sheriff sent through here every day as well, right, that makes our response time a little bit shorter. So I just think it's important that was very intentional on the school system's part on the way that they chose to deploy those officers up to this point. Now we're talking about municipalities, which is where we're at today.
Could I change the subject just a bit? Still talking about safety, obviously. But could I turn it just for a minute to students that may have been identified as having some mental health issues? How the school systems are handling that as a deterrent from it escalating to something that can be not just an active shooter situation, but some kind of fight or whatever. But are we doing a good job of identifying those students that may have some mental health issues? I know you're talking about shortage. I think it's 107 teachers short. But what about social workers and clinical social workers or what have you in the context of the school system? Maybe Dane Butler, our new superintendent, can address that type of personnel.
Well, certainly, we can always do better. We know that. Post-pandemic, it's been a challenge. I believe we have one social worker and one counselor in every school right now due to ESSER funds.
Ms. Kim, Ms. Yarborough, if you want to come and address that, you could. She is also from the Ebenezer Church. So put your hands together for Ebenezer. All right.
Good evening. I'm Kim Yarborough, lead school social worker. And yes, we do have a school social worker and counselor in every school from ESSER funds. I'm hoping that will continue. I'll put a shameless plug in right now.
That will be my goal, to try to keep that after ESSER funding.
From
Certainly.
COVID, the COVID funding. So they were guaranteed
that goes away in
for 2
2024,
years.
right?
Yes.
2023, I thought. Okay, but whatever, that is...
Soon.
Yes. This upcoming year will be the last year for the school social workers that were funded through that, which was 12 this year.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Additionally, the county itself, municipalities all together, and I think the school system are all working together to identify. Secret Service did a report in June 2021, fairly recently, June 21, like right now, that said that by far the majority of school attacks, like we've just witnessed across the country, were those individuals were identified well in advance, anywhere from a month to years in advance. We have got to address the mental health issue, be it mental health itself, be it alcohol, be it drugs, whatever. The county also, we have a diversion center now, but it's limited. And we're trying to expand that, the county commissioners are, that would give us the ability to have individuals identified, and they could be identified by the school, they could be identified by a counselor, they could be voluntarily going to the diversion center, could be by law enforcement, but some facility that they could go and not turned out when the lights went out, so to speak, that they could have up to 16 beds. They could then hopefully have those individuals transferred to a longer term facility, but not dumped out on the street when the lights went out. Additionally, I know Judge Brown is in the audience, and he has a drug court that he's trying to implement. There's so many things, and Sean Boone, our county attorney, a prosecutor, is here as well, and they're all working on things like drug courts, the diversion center, and so many things that will help identify individuals and hopefully prevent those incidents from ever happening and get those individuals that are going to commit such a horrendous incident, give them help well in advance.
I'd love to jump in here on this conversation, and I appreciate you bringing up the topic of mental health. I recognize the often thankless work that our law enforcement officers here do every day to make sure they keep our communities and schools safe, so I want to thank you for all that. But I also know that depending solely on SROs is a challenging prospect moving forward, because this is a multifaceted issue, and that's putting more of the burden on you to solve a problem that is a community-wide problem. So addressing the issue of mental health, I think, is another stool, another leg on that stool. Part of what has been happening in Raleigh, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it is our responsibility to fund the personnel, and until every single one of my colleagues feels that way, right now courts, both Democrat and Republican judges, have said that we are currently underfunding our public school system in North Carolina by $800 million in the last budget. That is no longer a debate. That is a fact that has been found by multiple judges. And so if we want to address these issues properly, I'm so grateful that ABSS has used ESSER funds to fund a social worker for every school. but that is a temporary solution because we know ESSER funds are temporary. And so if we want the security and stability to make sure that we can depend on a social worker in every school for the next 10 to 20 years, we need to make sure that that funding is baked into the school funding that comes from the state level. And so that is a fight that I've been fighting for, and something that we as a community, I need your help on this one to make sure that when we talk about fully funding our public schools, it actually means what we're talking about today, to make sure that every school is safe, to make sure that we have a social worker for every school, that we have mental health programs and grants that allow schools to have some agency to say, hey, we have a really great partnership with our diversion center and law enforcement agency and mental health clinics. Give us some resources so we can implement some creative programs here. It doesn't all have to be top down. We all know what we're doing, right? We just need to have the resources to implement those programs effectively.
I agree with you very much. I basically run the biggest mental hospital in Alamance County. And I can tell you, if a lot of those individuals had been identified at a younger age with these mental health problems through our schools and our mental health people in the schools, they would never have wound up in the Alamance County Detention Center. And a lot of times, these people wind up, can't make the bond that is posted that has mental health problems, and they wind up attacking another inmate or detention officer, and they may only been in there for a misdemeanor, but once they do that, it's a felony, and their life is ruined from that point on. And this is something that we need to look real hard at, and Raleigh needs to help us too, to deal with these mental health issues, because we are losing a lot of people that could be viable citizens. Had they been diagnosed, treated properly, and dealt with, they would have been viable citizens out here just like you and I. And that is a very important issue that I stand on. Our diversion center, I have raised King for 5 years to get that diversion center. Thanks to our commissioners, it's coming. And it cannot come soon enough as far as I'm concerned.
I want to get the DA and at least one of the county commissioners that's in the audience to respond to this, because we're putting all the heat on the chair because he's up here, but he's one vote. And what this is about is solutions. And so he can't do anything by himself. So some of the heat need to be spread to also some of the county commissioners out there. What are you willing to do as far as funding is concerned? And I will say this about the mental health, and I know Judge Brown is out there, and I work on a volunteer basis through my nonprofit with inmates at the jail practically every day. And I can tell you, and this is not, well, yeah, it is going to try to scare you. If some of those individuals do not get the treatment that they need, you will be facing, in my opinion, some things that we see in other states on national television, on national news, because some of those individuals really have issues with their mental health. They're not getting the treatment that they need. One part of the problem is, and I would like the DA, because this is a multifaceted situation that we're talking about. One of the issues is that you have individuals that are currently in the jail that does not get the representation from their defense attorneys, paid defense attorneys that they should be receiving. You have some people that are in jail 6, 7, 8 months on 30-day sentences that they attorneys have not come to see them. So now you imagine yourself being in a situation that you could be locked up for 30 days, but you've been in there for 8 months and you have nobody that is listening to you. That can cause somebody to lose it. I would lose it. And so you have these individuals that are saying that the system is broke, that they can't get in contact with their attorneys, that can't, and I know the DA will say that there's nothing that his department can do as long as they're represented, but they cannot get in contact with their attorneys. So that's part of the issue. And then again, I want one of the county commissioners to talk about funding as well.
Well, is this thing on? Okay. As well as what you're saying is true, and Michael he emails me whenever he has people who cannot get with their attorneys, and I forward those messages to my prosecutors and the attorneys. I think for the most part, the attorneys try to be responsive, but a lot of the problem that we have in our representation now for the criminal defense side is we have fewer attorneys who do criminal defense work. We have, at some point in time, you may have only 3 lawyers who represent people on the higher level felonies, the attempted murders, the rape charges, the robbery charges. And so you got maybe 3 lawyers with a caseload of about 50 people. So one thing that's being discussed, and Judge Brown's here again, that we've had these meetings with, we have had a very diverse discussion about how to work with our jail population. One thing is there is discussion about a public defender's office. A public defender's office has traditionally been something that has been something that has not been, supported in Alamance County. But now we are in a position where you have contract lawyers that are assigned out of Raleigh, and there might be enough lawyers to handle the low-level cases. There might be occasionally the ones to handle the middle-level cases, but the high-level cases that are coming through increasingly more, we don't. So we're having that discussion about getting a public defender's office for Alamance County. That, if you have a public defender, that public defender is accountable to the senior resident Superior Court judge, and also the public defender, the appointed public defender, is also somebody that is responsible for all the contract lawyers. So at this point, if we have a problem, if Michael says there's somebody that's in the jail that has a problem with their lawyer, we can certainly do what we can and contact the attorney, but we have no power to do anything with the lawyer except maybe tell the judge, and the judge contact the attorney, and then the attorney ultimately is paid by people out of Raleigh. But going back to another way that we sort of work with our court system to try to bring things down, we just had a meeting today to expand our electronic monitoring. If you expand electronic monitoring, those low-level nonviolent crimes, those people can get out of our jail and still be supervised. And some people might say, well, monitoring really is not, it's not as secure as having somebody in jail. Actually, it's probably a little bit better in some cases, because the monitoring that we're looking at that's actually in place is real time. So if there is somebody out on a domestic charge and there is concern that they might come after the victim, now there's real-time monitoring that the victim can be alerted to. So if that person even comes near where they're at, alert goes to law enforcement and alert goes to the victim so they can get away. Because what we don't want to have is people being sitting ducks for the person that's stalking them. So that is in place. So between that, the diversion center, trying to get a public defender's office in place, those are things that we're doing. But I can tell you there's a flip side to this. The bond policy that we have in Alamance County was not one that was designed by Alamance County. It was foisted on us by a lawsuit. And what you see in a weirdly counterproductive way is low-level offenders, drug offenders specifically, are brought in and they're deemed to be, nonviolent, which is true, but they're typically given an unsecured bond or a very low bond, and they turn right back out. And we have had occasions where people have been bonded out, picked up by their dealer, and go and get Narcan because they overdose again. Law enforcement will tell you the number of people in this county who have been Narcaned multiple times, even in the same night, is alarming. And it used to be these people are making these bonds before they ever talk to an attorney, before they can even maybe have a family member come get them. I've had people come to my office asking me why the person got out, because they wanted to try to find a treatment center for their daughter, but their daughter already made bond, and she's now back with the supplier. So there's not even a chance for people to breathe. And then law enforcement, if they get involved, the same person may end up with 2, 3, and 4 different charges. And that only puts more work on the sheriff and on the police departments, on all of our resources. It puts tremendous pressure on the court system and the jails. But we're doing everything we can to divert those things, because as a prosecutor, as the DA, the only people I want to see in our jail are the people that are going to get hard time. We don't need to be using our jail just to babysit, but there also has to be some accountability for people that just come in and just get turned right back out. They don't even have a chance to be evaluated for a monitor because they've already made their bond. So this is a very complex conversation, but I can tell you that there's a lot being done to try to lower the amounts of people in our jail. And I can tell you right now, our jail does have its population lowered. We don't have a lot of those situations that we had in the past where somebody would sit in jail for 60 days without a lawyer. If they come in on a first appearance right now, if they don't get an attorney, they're brought back, and I believe they're brought back. And Judge Brown, correct me, how long is it that they have to be brought over for a first appearance? 72 hours? The very next day that we get in court. And that's not how it used to be, right? So what Judge Brown basically, what he said was that whereas it used to be you'd be brought in and you would be given a court date that could be 30 days down the road. If you're brought in and you're in custody on a misdemeanor, you're going to court within 24 hours or 48 hours, whatever the first available court session is. So we move more people out of that jail, and we don't detain in that jail people who shouldn't be detained.
But if that person gets that court date, I mean, I understand in theory that's how it's supposed to work, but that's not how it's working because you get the emails that I send you. So my thing is, if that person gets a court date within 3 or 4 days or whatever, or within 30 days, if his attorney goes to court and asks for a continuance, he will get that continuance. Is that not correct?
That's more of an individual courtroom basis. If we presume the attorneys are doing their job, and we have to presume that. I'm not going to say that we must presume that lawyers don't do what they're supposed to do. We presume that the lawyer has seen their client. We presume that the lawyer is now in a position to handle the case. A lot of times, on the first time the case is on, that's the first time the lawyer has a chance to speak to the officer, the first time they have a chance to determine whether or not there's merit to the case. And at that point, then, if there seems to be something that is pointing towards guilt and sufficient, that lawyer should, at that point, try to get something done with the case. But on the flip side of that, if they believe there's something insufficient about the case, that's when, in lieu of getting it continued, they should ask for a bond reduction. But there are ways you can do that, but we have to presume that the lawyers, having been trained and actually vetted out of Raleigh for the Indigent Defense Services, are doing what they're supposed to do. A public defender's office would give us the ability to have a supervisor at the local level, a judge at the local level, who can tell that lawyer, you need to go see your client. Right now, if that doesn't happen, we just got to send something off to IDS in Raleigh and hope for the best.
Okay, well, I know time is running short, so did you?
All right, Mr. Carter, do you want to share about the funding? Then we go back to the school, and maybe we have a few minutes for some parents and community members to ask some questions.
Michael, I'm Steve Carter, by the way, Vice Chair of your County Commission. Michael, I'm going to have to apologize, but after the last conversation, I don't remember what your question was. So.
As far as funding, we know Mr. Paisley is, what are you willing and other members to do to make sure that the funding that's the school system for the SRO officers, any keypads or automatic locked doors or whatever needs, what are you going to do about funding?
Well, the last thing I want to do is speak for another county commissioner, okay? And Pam Thompson's here with us today. I'm here. My platform issue back in 2018 when I ran was an SRO in every school. I wanted that, and I still want that, and I want to see us try and make that happen. Now, the problem is we've identified today and I think you've heard from here today, 6 months, 8 months, 6 to 8 months to get one SRO in the school. You got to go out and hire them, train them, equip them, and put them in position. So it's not going to happen tomorrow. We can't just magically pick 14 people, I think it is, out of the county population and say, you're an SRO, here you go, take on the job. We can't do that. We've got to find qualified people, get them trained. But yes, I've supported trying to get an SRO in every school ever since my wife is a retired teacher. I've seen the need. When she was teaching and she was in school and we had the first situations with school shootings, I said, I don't want her in school with without somebody in there to protect her. Now, one of the things I said earlier and was revealed earlier with Dr. Merrill is that in the Norfolk City or Norfolk County schools?
Virginia Beach. Virginia Beach.
Virginia Beach schools. They used experienced retired military and retired law enforcement to serve as security in the schools. They may not have been sworn officers, but they were providing security. And that goes back to Ricky and our legislative team into trying to get the laws changed so that we can have people in the schools who can provide defense in a situation like this. The other issue, I look at our new high school, and one SRO, there may be multiple deputy sheriffs on the campus before he can get to the location in that school on foot where there might be a situation going on. So, we've got big schools. Your response time on foot is going to be less than it's going to take you a while to get across a campus or to a location or something like that possibly. So,
but our question
as well.
But our question is, and I think the public's question is if the superintendent says that we can call it whatever we want to call them, SRO officers, security officers, and I would like to know what is the difference between just a regular deputy and an SRO officer. I think I would like to know what that is.
Well, you went above my pay grade with that question, Mike.
All right, well, but my question is, if sheriff and the superintendent say this is what we need, as far as the budget, the county budget, which you have the power to do, has nothing to do with what the superintendent says or anybody else, you have the power to vote for funding for the needs of the school. Will you vote for that need if the superintendent says it is a security need?
Well, I've said I wanted SROs in every school. I don't know how much plainer I can make it than that.
You can say that you would vote for funding.
I will vote for it, yeah.
All right, thanks.
Let me say this about just a security officer. First of all, the school would have to hire that security officer because SRO has to go through a specialized training before they go into the schools. And a security officer, I don't know how the school system feel by security, just a person being armed, not a sworn law enforcement
We prefer SROs over that.
And that's what I figured. And I would too, because, there could be a whole lot of situations that occur that security officer could not respond to.
Ms. Thompson, would you like to have a word since Mr. Carter and Ms. Paisley have spoken? We'll give you a minute or two, then we're going to try to come on up. Come on down, the price is right.
Hey everybody, I'm Pamela Thompson. I used to be on the school board for 8 years, and I'm on your commissioner board right now. And I've been on both sides of this game. I'm also a forensic interviewer. I'm in the jail every day interviewing people with drug addiction problems and getting them into residential treatment. And it just doesn't start from the minute I meet them. It goes way back with all kind of trauma attached to it that could have been missed or could have been found with the right personnel in front of these young people. We got a lot of problems. But I will say this, whatever it takes, I'm going to support, because I do not want our children to be on the news. I don't want to have to do an interview on the news, and I don't want anybody to feel like they're going to have to be in a position where their children aren't safe at school. They are our future. We should guard them and put every ounce of love and protection we have in them.
Thank you, Ms. Thompson. All right, before I turn it over to Mike, and we get ready to conclude, Mike, if you would allow, if someone have a pertinent question that you want to address one of these distinguished personalities here. Again, no sermons. I do sermons, so no sermons. No sermons, but if there's a direct, concise question that is within their capacity, remember, we cannot change AR-15 laws. So if there's a question that you have dealing with public safety in schools, I see this hand. Will you come, sir? If there's anybody else want to come, if you stand behind him, if you come quickly, and you have 30 seconds to ask your question, and then, of course, we have just two. Anyone else? Anyone else? All right. If you go behind the camera, my sister and my sister's. So if we have 4 people, after these 4 people ask their question and it's answered, then of course we're going to ease on down the road.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Pastor. My name is Anthony Pierce. Just for, I guess, to be completely clear, I'm also a candidate for county commissioner. I heard a lot of talk about SRO officers. Well, as a former paramedic, going on to weapons of mass destruction, courses, et cetera, back when we were having that, a lot of us, and maybe you all enforcement officers may be familiar with it, we learned different ways of hardening those soft targets. So a school is deemed a soft target. SRO officer, yes, that is one tool that can be used, but, and I'll be humorous here, but just like Commissioner Turner mentioned, these schools are pretty large, and if you're in the southern part of the school and you need to, and the threat is in the northern, you better run pretty fast to be able to get to that threat. But what I want to ask to all of you on the panel is, have there been any discussions about hardening these soft targets? Because that's a facilities thing. And what we learned in weapons of mass destruction training is creating layers. Meaning, soon as an individual get out of the car, one layer is there's eyes on that person as soon as they got out of the car. Many of you have been to sporting events, they call them jersey barriers. We were told not to call them that, but I will this time. But that is a delay before that particular threat to get to that soft target. What can we do as a community and as leadership to increase those, to put things in place to harden those soft targets? Have there been any budget discussions about those items?
That's law enforcement.
I can tell you this, it was brought up today in these meetings about locks and different stuff on the school buildings, which would prevent the individual from entering that building unless you kick the door, and the doors that were supposed to be put up. It's sort of like the courthouses, you have to have a key to get in, and that was discussed in the meetings, 2 meetings I was at today, and trying to get that done. Once again, some of our school buildings are old in the doors. Some of them don't even lock halfway. So it's going to take money to do this to the schools. And that's something that we're going to have to look at, because if we want our schools safe, we need to provide, first of all, make it a hard target to get into. Secondly, a school resource officer in that school would certainly help it tremendously too.
Yeah, I don't really have a lot to add to that, other than I think that this is a multi-layered approach over a period of time, right? There's great technology out there, everything from keyless entry to cameras to bullet-resistant film. There's technology, right, is growing so fast. The meetings I was in earlier in the day, and I think the one tomorrow, there'll definitely be a continued push to make these schools safer by environmental design.
Thank you, Pastor. Seneca Rogers, candidate for ABSS School Board, and I have just 2 questions. My first one is on the additional SRO positions. I know the county schools are all covered because Sheriff Johnson already said that, but with these additional positions, does that mean that the municipality schools that are covered now part-time, are they going to have a full-time person? And then also the next part is, I'm glad to hear about the school safety task force, because I know when I went up in front of y'all in January, I was talking about that. And so I just hope on that task force too, that y'all add in guidance counselors and social workers into that, because we can continue to talk about SROs and the tangible building and the brick and mortar buildings, but I think we have to go over into that mental wellness piece and that emotional safety and traumas for the students and our teachers too.
Butler, would you like to, and then Ms. Sandy address?
Well, I think, again, if we are able to get the additional 10, 14, whatever the number is, SROs, that's covered. We're good to go. It's going to take some time. That is the initial layer, as he was talking about out there, of defense, in my opinion. Long term is mental health, Seneca. That's not something that can happen overnight. I have to address that as a new superintendent. How are we going to address social and emotional learning? Post-pandemic, that's just as important as instruction. That has to be on my radar. We have kids that have forgotten how to do school, that come to us with minimal support from home. And I'm of the belief that if you're in education, you own that, and that you know that you're not just a teacher. You're a caregiver, medical provider, counselor, social worker, nurse, whatever it takes to get through the day to help that child. And unfortunately, sometimes that means that it's as risky as worrying about a kid that might bring a gun to school. And we have to have the resources in place to head that off. And of course, the SRO, it needs to be the first thing we do, because we can't afford to wait on that, in my opinion. Texas is one day away. I look at it that way. We have to look at it that way, unfortunately. And I can't live with that on my watch. Although my watch hasn't started ticking just yet. It will be soon. And I'm here tonight because I'm passionate about this. We've got to have that SRO. But long-term, Seneca is right. Mental health is really at the crux of this. It's not about the weapon. It's really not. It's about the person who chooses to use it. And we've got to increase our ability to identify those kids at risk to get them help.
Sandy, would you like to add anything?
It's well spoken, Dr. Butler. And it's, yes, the 10 SROs would give us a full-time SRO at every school. And having that mental health piece on it, particularly when the school task force, to have those voices at the table is going to be instrumental. But I also just want to circle back to the SROs. Part of the SRO job is that relationship piece, and that's something that has sometimes, often, it doesn't get the attention I think that it deserves, but they build relationships with these kids and these communities. And I think that goes a long way from the mental health piece, from that social emotional learning piece, is that when these kids are involved in situations, there is somebody that they trust, that's there with them. And it was nice to be at the graduations and see our SRO officer come to the graduation and support these kids that they've been mentoring. And I think there's another layer of that SRO is that relationship piece and that trust factor that I think a lot of our kids benefit from. So I don't know if that answered all the questions, but
appreciate it. We're going to try to move. My sister.
I'm a retired educator from Bertie County, and I once was a school counselor and assistant principal and other things. My concern about the SRO is that I feel like they need more training after they're hired. Give them more training, from time to time, so that they can get used to those kids that they're working with, not only the kids, but the teachers and the administrators of that sort. Thank you.
Anybody want to take that?
Well, every officer has to go through at least 40 hours of in-service training every year. That includes SROs. Plus, our agency, we're trying to get every officer crisis intervention training, CIT training, to be able to deal with some of these kids, be able to identify some of the problems that kids may have in school, and work with the school counselors and the psychologists to get that child the proper treatment.
Is diversity training and de-escalation training a part of that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here and have met you guys. I can put faces with some of the names that I'm familiar with. My name is Lisa Mebin. I am from here, and I also worked at the Sheriff's Department in Norfolk, Virginia. What I see happening, and I hate that this is what I see. The schools are going to be so much like a prison or a jail. SROs are great, but we need more. What I see is a command center with cameras at every entrance and exit to stop those people before they even make it that far. I'd rather go ahead and do it right at the gate instead of later, because unfortunately, unless we identify what's really going on, everybody that shoots up a place does not necessarily have a mental issue. They could have been bullied in school. I've seen it before. I've been at schools where a little boy actually came and asked the librarian, could he sit in there? And I asked her, I said, well, why did he do that? She said, I think he's being bullied. And I said, well, does anybody know? Because that same kid will remember, oh yeah, I remember what you did. And then here they come back with an automatic assault rifle. So we have to make sure that what we're identifying is really correct and true. Everybody doesn't have a mental issue. Some people are just mean. They should not have access. Anybody that's buying an assault rifle, period, should go through thorough evaluation. Just like determining like a police officer. In a class that I took, I asked, when you put on that badge, when you finish, what are you going to feel with that badge? Are you going to feel power or responsibility? Because there is a difference.
I would like to address what I know we quick, but that's exactly why our agency, we send them to mental health evaluation, we have them take a polygraph and a drug test. We want to make sure that the officers we put on the street can deal with the issues they're going to have to deal with in an appropriate way.
One of the things that was implied by Sister Mebbins, I think, what she shared, here at this church, with our computer cameras and stuff, we have 25 views, you know. So let's say if I'm driving, I just use the school as an example. If I'm driving on Cummings ground, when will the cameras pick my car up? If there's somebody sitting at the computer. I see.
I can't tell you that. I think that's one of those security things that we don't advertise. Dr. Thorpe might.
Well, but a general thing, you get what I'm saying. She was talking about the cameras and taking angles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I don't want specifics, but you know.
Okay.
Just very general, we have multiple cameras on many of our sites, and we have RFPs out now to have cameras added to even more sites. The goal is to have the camera pick up someone the first time someone could lay eyes on them would be as they enter the parking lot. The second time a camera will definitely see them is when they go up to the front door to buzz in. There's a camera there. They have to buzz. They have to get clearance to come through the front door. And then once they're in the vestibule, there's another camera on them at that point. Then throughout the school, the goal is for every school to be equipped with cameras that would follow you pretty much anywhere you go outside of a restroom.
I wanted to address the other part about the training or whatever for the specifically for the SROs in the school. Another thing that's really important so that schools don't feel like a police state or whatever is the SROs and the principals have to know their roles. You know? We don't want a bunch of, you know, today somebody said, will you make a commitment and make the statement that you want an SRO in every school? You know, that is, I'm not going to tell you my personal opinion, but that's something that the board basically said that they did. But one of the things since I've been serving on this board is I have been saying, you know, we got to protect parents' rights, that SROs should not be in our schools investigating things that the principal could handle. They investigate crimes. Crimes. And I always tell my child, don't ever, my children, my husband and I, no, you don't have a conversation with the law enforcement officers unless it's hi and I like your badge and do you have a dog in the car? Otherwise, principals need to do their part, which is enforce the student code of conduct and handle disciplinary actions. Parents need to know their role, and that is remain calm, talk with your kid about the role of an SRO, you know, cooperate or call mom and dad or whatever the case. But we have to have roles, in other words. If we're going to have 14, all these SROs, the next thing is my phone going to start ringing. I don't know how it can ring anymore, but it's going to be ringing saying this, they interviewed my child, they did this, they did this, they did that. So a component of that training process is knowing your role. And a part of our superintendent's expectation is that he communicates with our school administrators who have the responsibility of enforcing the code of conduct to know their roles. So that's a very important part to make this whole security thing work the way it should be working.
I think we need to, time is gathers. So just very quickly, I always ended with a wish list. Starting with Superintendent, add known, just what do you want from this conversation? What would you like to see? If it's SRO officers, if it's locked doors or whatever, what would you like from the conversation? For if you could get it tomorrow, what would you like? That's for each school member. And for law enforcement, what can you provide? Are you already providing that? And what do you need to provide if you need more funds to provide that? We already got the commitment from the county commissioners, with 2 of them, that it will be funded, the SROs, but we need to make sure that your wish list from the superintendent will be honored.
Yeah, I just want an SRO in every school right now. That's my biggest priority.
I'd like a check for $522,000 and the agreement that they realized that would be added to our continuation budget for the years to come. It's not a one-time funding thing. I would love for us to, the state, Ricky, to take the recommendations that we talked about tonight, and I would really appreciate if our parents will parent their child and support law enforcement in the public schools. And we talked about cell phones. There's so many things. So I'm so happy that you hosted this event and the fact that it's on YouTube. And I would encourage everybody to look at it. But one of the significant problems that we're having today that we didn't have 20 years ago is the neighborhood, as Seneca would say, would take care of our children and hold them accountable and provide the discipline. Most of the time, I hold the phone for the first 2-3 minutes when somebody calls me, because I tell them, until you calm down and stop telling me what you're going to do, and your child is sitting right next to you, I can't have a conversation. So we got to learn how to talk to our children, hold our children accountable, and raise our children to have respect. And we expect the same back from law enforcement. It's a partnership to make it work. That would be my dream for public education.
So my wish list would be 10 SROs so that we can have an SRO in every school, hard targets, and a continued passion and shared collaboration with law enforcement and county commissioners. I think we're in the start of something really good, and I'd like to see that continue. And that parent thing Patsy talked about.
I would love to see every school in this county to be the safest schools in the country. And I am willing to do whatever's necessary, and my people are, to make that happen. And certainly we're going to need the support of the commissioners, of the school board, and of the communities, because that's where it starts. And we're going to be there to make sure our kids are safe. And it never happens what happened in Texas. That was totally a sad situation, and in my opinion, uncalled for.
Yeah, I think I would just echo what Sandy said with regard to the collaboration. That's my wish list, is just continued collaboration around this issue. We're already the recipients of the ERSO money that we use currently to try to get as many hours in our elementary schools. And if you're successful in your request, then we'll just need some time to onboard some highly qualified candidates to be effective in the school.
I think it's got to be a partnership. As Ms. Simpson just indicated, it's got to be a partnership with you as parents, you as grandparents, all the students, the Alamance Burlington school system, the county commissioners, and law enforcement, heavy-duty law enforcement. And Mr. Butler, we're so glad that you're here. I look for really positive things from you and working with the school board itself. The partnership, we can make this work. Again, want to just echo or repeat what Ms. Simpson said about parenting. That is so important. Additionally, we've got to have our students understand that law enforcement's here to help you, to protect you. They're not the enemy, and they should not be feared. Partnership is a word. Thank you.
I think we can all agree that we want safe learning environments for every child where they're free of bullying, harassment, and violence. And to do that, we're going to need to make sure that our law enforcement are supported, that we're fully funding this SRO plan through our county commission, but at the same time, continue to have a greater conversation around what mental health support in our communities look like. Because at the end of the day, many of these mass shootings that have happened across the country have come from someone who has been bullied, harassed, or is mentally ill and has had easy access to a weapon that they shouldn't have had access to. So that comes to my third point there, is having a greater conversation around gun safety. I think that you can have a conversation around gun safety in our community without infringing on our Second Amendment rights to bear arms, right? And so when you think about safe storage in our communities, I've been studying and researching what local communities and states have been doing across the country to make sure that we can send an easy message, for example, even to parents, to say, hey, safe storage is a priority in our communities, and these are easy ways for you to make sure you can keep your gun safe in the community. That's something easy that can come from school boards, from county commission, that doesn't require policy, that doesn't require law, it requires leadership. So I think those, for me, are 3 steps that we can take to make sure we keep our community safe.
Oh, you want any final words, Mr. Mike?
Just want to thank everybody for coming out. Of course, my church for hosting this. The law enforcement presence, we really thank you for the jobs that you do every day protecting our society. So heartfelt thanks for that. I do want to echo something that Pat said in the beginning, is that to the public, the solution lies with us. The officials are accountable to us. If we so desire that we want SRO officers in every school, that we want a certain type of computers and things in our schools, we can get that. That is our decision. We have a paid expert, that is our superintendent. That's what he is, that's his job. And if he comes to the county commissioners and say that these are things that he needs to protect our kids, it is up to us to make sure that our county commissioners provide those things. And one of the things that I found very concerning is when Chair Graves said, and we're not any kin, but when Chair Graves said that
you don't know that.
Well, you may be right. You may be right. When Chair Graves said that, when we asked the question, how is the decision made to place SRO officers in schools? And if it was my understanding, it is that the elementary schools are the ones that do not have the SRO officers there full-time. Those are the most vulnerable. Those are the ones that cannot protect themselves. And so that's concerning to me. And that is what happened in Texas. So I do want to say to the county commissioners that you need to sometimes just put it right there out there to you. If God forbid that happens in our community, it will lie with you. It will lie with you, because the superintendent has said what we need. The law enforcement, the experts have said what they need to protect our kids. So now it's up to you to fund it.
Let me say a word of thanks to those of you that have come out. And again, let's give a hand for all law enforcement. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sometimes you're undervalued and underappreciated and over-criticized. So we appreciate you. And those of you that work in the court system and the other systems of this county and this community, we appreciate your job also. I was just in Baltimore last week. I went there to attend a funeral service. Got to turn around and go back early tomorrow morning to preach another funeral service. But I was there, and we parked our car, and the preacher who took me, we listened to between 11 and 12 and 13-year-old children. And I want y'all to hear this. They were all male. They were talking about a gun, a gun, as if it was their girlfriend or whatever. They were talking about the barrel of it. It was just like this affection that they had. And I looked at the preacher who was with me, and I said, we need to do something to turn this around when there's so much affection. And they were talking about how they were going to shoot it and etc. They're just having a conversation between these three adolescents. So there's something sick in our society. We can talk about law enforcement, and we should. We can talk about school security, and we should. That's why we're here. But nothing exempts a village from taking care of its own. So I think that as parents, the one young man wanted to shoot black people, so he went to a grocery store. He was 18. The other went to the school. So there's an element of racism, and I appreciate Ms. Medman. Everybody who is doing these shootings are not sick. Racism is a very real issue in this country. So we have to come together as community to look after each other. So I appreciate you coming tonight. I know that we're going to do our best to do what we can for our young people because they are the leaders of tomorrow, but they have a voice today if they don't get killed. So let's get together. Parents, let's vote. Let's vote. Somebody said vote. Let's vote. Let's vote. We have 2 or 3 people that are running for offices. Will y'all stand again? All right. We're at 4, 5, 6. All right. We know Sheriff Johnson is running. We know Rick is running. And, we know the position. They just stated their position because they hit the mic. Brooke Carter is running. County Commission. Help me out again. We met the other day, but I forget the name again. Pierce. All right. Pierce is running. And you running for what? County Commission. Your name, sir, is? Kelly White is running for sheriff. And? All right, Senator Rod. Let's give a hand for all of them that are running. Which means those of you that are looking and watching, and those that will be watching, make sure you vote. All right, with that said, thank you very much. And we appreciate the judge here with his new wife, with his only wife, the Reverend Jayla Brown, Associate Minister of Ebenezer. Let's stand. Thank you all so much. Now listen, as we go, if you'd like to get a hold of any of these officers that are SO officers or what have you, please get a hold of them, speak to them, get to know them, especially if you have a child in one of the schools that they're working in. It would be advantageous for you to do so. God bless you. Have a good night, and may the Lord take a liking to you. Peace.